Let me tell you that you can stop binge eating. You absolutely can. It's just that some of us might be barking up the wrong tree. If you're new around here, I suffered with binge eating to some degree or another for 10 years. And now I have a healthy relationship with food. No urge to binge eat whatsoever. And let me tell you that for 10 years, I was barking up the wrong tree. I want to do something a little bit different for you guys today because I just finished with a client and I was writing up my notes and I have this long list with clients about mini breakthroughs and big breakthroughs that they have and the things that were behind them achieving them as they move from binge eating to a healthy relationship with food. Those of you that don't know, I'm a nutritional therapist and a disordered eating recovery coach, and I help women do just that. These are things that real people have done to make real change in their relationship with food. And for some of them, you're probably going to think, what on earth has that got to do with my relationship with food? And that's kind of the reaction that I want. I want these things to break down your preconceived ideas about what creates binge eating and get you considering other things, the littler things maybe, that move us along the ladder to where we want to go. You might think of binge eating as this thing that you do, it's like a block, it's like a chunk. I binge eat and I need to stop doing that. When really, in my experience, the binge eating is the symptom. The symptom of what exactly? It's usually many, many little things that all add together. And some of those, for other people, and perhaps you, I'd like to share with you today. One of the things that I always do is I do something called a timeline. The timeline of the development of the disordered relationship with food. And we sort of go in chunks, 0 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 15. If there's been some sort of development in the disordered relationship with food, we will take a pause to reframe then, and I will ask my clients, at this point in time, what was it that you really needed? Had it been there, your disordered relationship with food wouldn't have developed. What was it that underneath all of it, the sneaking food, the throwing away lunches, the trying to be thinner, all of it, deep down under it, what was it that you really needed? What was it that you were actually looking for? So many of us, in my experience, just think about our relationship with food now and how we're struggling now and what the sort of landscape looks like now, and haven't really gone back and thought, well, hang on a second, how has this come to pass? How has it come to pass that I use body control and food control in this way? How has that developed? What's behind it? What's driving it? Because let's not forget that we develop disordered eating practices, whether we're binge eating, emotional eating, overeating, restricting our food, because although in a very detrimental way, it is helpful to us in some way, and we need to understand in what way was it helpful? What way is it helpful? And then what can we do to actually help ourselves in a meaningful way? We can't pursue the weight control and the healing of the relationship with food at the same time. When we've decided that we want a healthy relationship with food, but we're not quite there yet, and we're trying to go through the process, this internal conflict obviously arises, this internal push and pull, which can be just horrible. I experienced it for many, many years. And if the decision is, yes, I do want a healthy relationship with food and I understand that will give me my natural healthy weight, it's at that point usually that clients turn around and say to me, I can see that I want to improve my body image. I want to learn to accept my body and appreciate my body and to not feel like I have to change outside of my natural healthy weight in order to like myself, to accept myself. And I know that might sound obvious, but actually getting to that point where we realize that that's what we must do and making that decision, all of a sudden change becomes a lot easier in some ways, because now we're just going down one path, and we know there will be challenges, but at least we're on one path and not trying to do two paths at the same time. This one is absolutely huge. So, you know, when you're hit with, let's say, a really intense craving or a really strong urge to binge, and it's almost like the past disappears and the future disappears and it's just you in the moment, and it's almost like you have absolutely no control over the decision that you're about to make. In order to get to that place where we're no longer binge eating, this sense of not having control, healthy control, or a choice really needs to be worked on, in my experience. We can't be walking around thinking that we have no control and we have no choice. That's just not going to work. So something that has proven to be really helpful for clients is starting to speak to themselves in the context of I am choosing. Whether choosing to do something helpful or unhelpful, I am choosing to think that I look fat. I am choosing to think that I'm not good enough. I am choosing to go to the shops and binge eat. I am choosing to skip this meal. I am choosing to not go out and socialize. I am choosing to make myself feel insecure. If we don't allow ourselves to recognize that we are the one choosing to do everything that we ever do in life, for whatever reasons we might be doing them, no one's discounting the motivations or the reasons behind them, but by saying to ourselves that we don't have a choice and we're not in control, there's nowhere that we can move with that. We do have a choice and we are in control. So I often get clients to do this in the moment. So they're having an intense craving, or they're about to skip a meal, or they're going to binge eat, just to say you absolutely can do those things. You absolutely can. But first, just take a moment and say, I know this may not be very helpful for me and I'm choosing to do it anyway. Then we can start to layer on, I know this isn't very helpful for me. It would be more helpful to do X, but I'm choosing to do it anyway. And over time, in the moment, we start to gain more of a sense of choice and awareness and mindfulness and competency, which we might not have had before. This has helped so many of my clients, they'd be the first to testify to this, to begin to make decisions that align with their long-term goals, taking their power back, essentially. Next up, eating food that they actually enjoy. So ultimately, moving away from being dictated by food rules and calories and moving more towards what nutritious food can I make that I'm also actually going to really enjoy, because there is going to be a lot of overlap. And the brilliant thing about this is that when we can eat food that both nourishes us and we enjoy, now we're moving more into a place where we can feel satisfied by the food we're eating and less deprived. When the aim of our game is to eat as little as possible, essentially, or as few calories as possible, or as clean as possible, it can leave us with this deep sense of dissatisfaction. You know, we've all been there, and we leave the restaurant or the meal thinking about what other people ate because it looked so good and it would have satisfied us. We can be so afraid of eating food that satisfies us, in case it means that we're eating too much, or maybe we won't be able to control ourselves around it. But what if it just helps us eat in line with our appetite cues? Bear in mind, these are just isolated tips, as it were. If you're there thinking, well, it's not as easy as just that, I do appreciate that. Everything sort of ties in together, much like creating a puzzle, essentially. If you'd like support and understanding of your personal puzzle, as it were, and you're thinking you might want to work with me directly, then you're very welcome to book a free call with me below and we can discuss it. Next up, making an effort for ourselves. What do I mean by that? For some of my clients, this means doing their hair or doing their makeup or wearing a nice outfit. For others, it might mean spending that time journaling or having a bath or having some me time if they're a busy mum. It's making an effort to put ourselves first, or do something nice for ourselves, or to show ourselves some self-care or love or some appreciation, essentially. And making an effort for themselves is something that many of my clients put into the future when they have succeeded at weight loss, or stopped binge eating, or created a healthy relationship with food, or built a healthy lifestyle for themselves. And the question becomes, is that actually a helpful way round of doing it? Or would it in fact be easier to make healthy decisions for ourselves? In a more general sense, what if by putting our happiness and our wellness and our self-care first, it makes stopping binge eating and using that coping mechanism and that escapism easier to do, in part, as one piece of the puzzle? And many of my clients, after just a week of making an effort for themselves, come back often with a smile on their face, with that little bit more confidence, and that means a lot. Validating emotions. Some of my clients that this has been wonderfully helpful for did not even realize that this was something that they could have done that would have been helpful. What do I mean by that? Well, if we've got certain emotions that we consider to be bad or negative or unacceptable, then when those emotions come up, it might lead us to want to ignore them or block them out or escape them. Do you see where I'm going with this? And one of the common ways when we've got disordered eating to escape certain emotions that we don't want to feel might be to restrict food and focus on that, plan a diet, focus on that, binge eat, focus on that. For me personally, it was anger. My whole life I said I don't get angry, I took pride in it, never really feel it, never really express it. Turns out I did feel anger, I just never actually felt it because I was distracting myself with restricting food and binge eating by spending a few minutes every day to go through, what did I feel today? I felt disappointed today, I felt sad today, I felt happy today, I felt excited today. And you know what? That's valid. To be with their emotions, to validate their emotions, to experience their emotions as a normal part of the human experience and not something that necessarily has to be blocked out. Flexibility training. It is no secret that in our corner of the world, as people that are more prone to eating disorders, that perfectionism tends to be quite a common trait. We tend to like to create rules for ourselves, and we tend to like to be quite rigid in those rules because we see them as a means to gain the success that we're looking for, maybe, or a way of controlling and making sense of things. One of the issues that can arise out of that I see time and time again, and I have my own personal experience with, is what happens if we violate one of those rules. When it comes to binge eating, something very interesting seems to happen. I was doing a bit of research the other day and I came across this study where essentially they took people who were restrained eaters, so who were more weight and food conscious, and individuals who weren't restrained eaters. They were what we consider people with a normal, healthy relationship with food. And the study so goes that they gave all of these participants some milkshake to drink. And something interesting happened. Contrary to what might seem logical, it was the restrained eaters who were more food and weight concerned that ate more food after the milkshake than the unrestrained eaters, those that weren't food and weight concerned. Now on the surface, this doesn't seem to make much logical sense, but maybe you have experienced this. Why did they conclude this happened? Because the restrained eaters saw the drinking of the milkshake as a violation of one of their dietary rules, and it instigated something that is sometimes referred to as the what the hell effect. Everything is now wrong, so I might as well keep going. And the temptation might be to think that these individuals, or we, are food and weight concerned because we have a predisposition for eating a lot of food anyway. But what if it's the other way around? And that's what I want you to consider. What if it's these rules that we impose on ourselves that can set us up to catastrophize essentially eating a cookie or two? If we didn't have these rules, could we eat a cookie or two and just move on? Would that mean that less binges occur? It's something to consider. And the last one that I want to end on just for today is this concept of assertiveness. So assertiveness essentially is the middle ground between being passive and being aggressive. It's being clear on our needs and our wants and our opinions and being able to kindly and politely express them and feel comfortable doing so. That's how I see assertiveness anyway. And again, what on earth has that got to do with moving away from binge eating? Well, for a lot of my clients, it turns out it's got a lot to do with moving away from binge eating. I'll give you a real life example from a client of mine. So she messaged me and essentially said, I've spent all day eating sugary foods. I see, okay, what do you think was driving this behavior? Well, I was incredibly tired today and I was looking for a pick-me-up. I see, okay, what was behind you feeling tired? Well, I didn't sleep very well and I woke up not feeling very well, feeling quite ill, and then went into work. Okay, I see. What was it that you think you really needed? What would it have been more helpful for you to do? Well, if I had called up my boss to explain that I'm not feeling very well and taking the day off to stay at home and rest, I think that would have been the most helpful thing to do. Okay, what stood in your way of doing that? Well, I didn't feel comfortable calling my boss to say that. I didn't want to let anyone down. When I asked, do you think it's reasonable to stay home from work if you're feeling really unwell? She said yes. When I asked her, do you think this is a case of not being able to assert yourself in the way that you would like? She said yes. I asked her, had you been able to assert yourself and tell your boss that you're not feeling very well and you need the day off work, and you had sat and taken care of yourself and watched movies and rested essentially, do you think you would have spent all day eating sugary foods? And she said no. So assertiveness is one of those obscure ones that doesn't seem to be related and yet comes up time and time again. I don't think I've yet worked with a client where we haven't worked on assertiveness, because being assertive allows us to have our needs met. And if we can get our needs met in meaningful and effective ways, it just means that we're less likely to turn to disordered habits with food to fulfill those needs. If you're currently dealing with binge eating or food obsession or perhaps emotional eating, and you really want to have that easy and peaceful and healthy relationship with food, I so strongly believe that you can have it. It's often just about getting onto that right path, you know, and sometimes having the support in order to stay on the path and fitting those pieces of the puzzle together. If you want to understand what on earth that journey might look like for you, then again, you're very welcome to book in a free call with me below and we can discuss it. Thank you so much for watching, guys. If you want more videos like this, then just let me know, but otherwise I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.